Craziest foods. First one comes to mind is called piftie. And what I always call it pig face jelly. So what they do, I've actually seen someone make it, at least I think they were making it. They get a pig's head and they take all the meat that they can off of it, boil it in water with onion and garlic, and then pour it into a container and let it congeal till it's a jelly. And not exactly the best food, but it was definitely a good experience for sure. It's not an American food, let's say that. There was one investigator I had actually. We were in the middle of a lesson, and he had literally just kicked the Jehovah's Witnesses out because they'd told him that his daughter was, I don't know, that they were gonna have problems. And so when we knocked on the door, he thought we were the Jehovah's Witnesses again. It's like, no, we're the Mormons actually. You had requested us because he'd asked for a Book of Mormon. And so he invited us in. He was a little drunk, and we just had a great time with him. He was pretty funny. Older guy, love him to death. But at one point, he tells us that, I guess you could say I did have a knife pulled on me on my mission. He says that he knows why Christ was sentenced to death. It was because in Jewish law, or in Roman law, if you killed someone, you were sentenced to death. And so he takes out a knife and it's like, I have an example here for you. And he comes up to me and he's shaking this knife and he's like, if I were to kill you right now, I'd be sentenced to death, right? And he's shaking the whole knife at me the whole time. And I understood what he's saying, but my companion was a second transfer companion. He didn't understand the language at all. He saw this knife coming out and was frightened to death. It was kind of funny, but it was completely safe. We had a good time. He invited us over a couple of times, and he actually, we committed him to not drink, at least before the next lesson, like right before, so we'd be sober-minded. And he said that he would, or when we met with him again, it's like, haven't touched a drop of alcohol since we met last. And it was like a week later. So that was really awesome to see. This is one, I don't know if anyone actually made it because they made a very good distinction of it in the MTC, but I think someone did at some point. So there's the word kopi, which is children, and then kopi, which is copies. So you have to be careful when you're on the street and you don't ask people, oh, where do I make copies? And you accidentally say the other word. So luckily there's another word for copies, and you can say Xerox was Xerox. So that's a safe word to use, but that's a good one that you hear all the time. So first winter in the country, it was like completely dry, no snow. Like I got in January and there was nothing until like halfway through January or end of January, I don't remember when, but it just snowed a ton. There was like 2 feet of snow. Like there were cars parked on the side of the road and you couldn't tell that they were parked there because there was so much snow covering everything. In some places, like there are definitely poor people and poor members. And there are a lot of times that I chopped wood. And so I had chopped wood before, but once you got some members there, they have a crazy way of doing it. Like normally you think of chopping wood and you take the axe and go all the way down, right? Well, they just take the end of it and just chop super close by, rip it open super fast. I don't know if I can do it that well, but they did it so well that like I can't do it as well as I can, but I've learned at least the general idea for it. Yeah, and just chop right there and just blow it out so fast, and you're thinking you're gonna chop your hand off. One of the hard things was finding investigators, because a lot of people aren't terribly open to listening, at least in the ways that I was finding people. There are definitely other ways of doing it, and so it was very difficult sometimes. Most people would have multiple weeks on their mission that they wouldn't have any lessons. I can only think of 1 week that I didn't have any numbers, any key indicators. So that was a bit difficult for me. But most of the times we did have at least one lesson each week, but it was very difficult sometimes to find investigators, just because a lot of them are kind of stuck in their ways, unfortunately. I think part of it was my mindset, was because a lot of times we'd go out and have, not consciously per se, but subconsciously thinking we're not going to find anyone. And so the motivation was kind of down. And so I definitely say go out with more faith. If I would have gone out with more faith and believing a lot more strongly that I could find someone, that I was meant to find someone, then I think that the work could have gone a lot better.
Okay.
The first one that comes to mind,
And if there's a couple you want to share, that's totally fine.
yeah, this one's actually kind of personal to me. It was in the MTC. I was having kind of a really hard time, because I feel like most people do. We had a testimony meeting in which everyone was bearing their testimony about Jesus Christ, and everyone got the opportunity to, but I didn't bear my testimony because I saw the strength of their testimonies in Christ, and I had a really hard time. Honestly, I didn't know. I was out on a mission and I didn't know. I didn't have a strong enough testimony about Jesus Christ, and so there was a time that for a couple of weeks at least, I considered turning back and not going out on my mission. But I prayed hard, and you hear all those people are like, yeah, and then I had a great spiritual experience that night, and it was great. Well, I didn't have one of those. Not that night. Not the next night. It took a very long time, and that was around Christmas time too. Well, it eventually got better. I didn't feel as depressed about it, but it was still kind of hard. And so, come next Christmas time, I was a district leader in Cluj-Napoca, great city, one of my favorites. And it was me and my companion, 2 sisters, the zone leaders, and a senior couple there. And so I decided for district meeting right before Christmas, we'd have a little nativity thing. Read through the Luke, the Christ's story in Luke, and all the while singing songs that connected to it really well. And so what we did was we acted it out. I was the narrator. The other elders were the shepherds. Sisters were obviously the angels. And the senior couple was Mary and Joseph. And there was this little toy doll that they had. One of those, you'd lean it over and the eyes closed, and you'd put it up and the eyes open again. Had markers all over it. The arm was a little disfigured. But they brought the child, one of the elder of the senior couple, he brought up the child, and they said they laid him in a manger and wrapped him in swaddling bands. And what he did, I don't know if this was just to be funny, just to be a part of the thing, I don't know what he did it for. But he took his scarf off, and he wrapped the child in his scarf. And at that moment, I had this realization, this strong realization, coming from the Spirit, that it was, you've known this whole time. You've known He's there. You've known that Jesus is Christ. You've been doing a good job. Keep it up. And the Spirit testified so strongly to me, and I felt such great joy. I couldn't talk for a little while because I was crying too hard. But I think everyone else felt the Spirit in that too. A lot of it comes down to timing and the Lord's will. Because a lot of people didn't see a ton of success on their missions. Well, baptism-wise, they saw success in other ways. But what matters is that your heart and your faith is in the right place. And if you're doing what you should, you'll have success in the Lord's eyes. Some people you'll see will have tons of baptisms even though they're disobedient or whatnot. It's because they're in the right time, the right place, whatever. But as long as you're doing what you're supposed to, the Lord will bless you. You may not, if it's for life, you may not be a billionaire while someone else is, but you will have success, and that's the important part. It's the Lord's success, not necessarily yours.